Thanks very much for the introduction. Just before we begin, I thought it was almost sort of, I almost feel like you need to kind of dampen the enthusiasm. Some people may be expecting a really heavy computer science talk, talking about these really interesting and complex data structures. This is going to be more of a sort of a medley of what's available to you in Python right now, rather than how to sort of implement the newest generation of the next algorithm you just saw in the latest computer science paper. I hope that's still going to be appropriate for everyone. And I thought a good place to start with Python is probably object. You call object and you get out an object. Object is the base of all objects within Python programming. And if you subclass and then go, everything subclass eventually gets there. And you wonder sort of, why would I ever use this in my own code? Well, if you wanted to compare two things, and they could possibly be singletons, you do get unique objects when you call it. And this is actually used in the standard library in this module email.feedparser. So there we have this need more data thing is created as a singleton right at the start of, or sort of at line 40. And it's used later on in the, I've got to use the mouse here. So in here, this self.input thing sucks out a line and then checks, is it this need more data? And buffered subfile returns need more data if it itself needs more data because it's only read part of the stream, because buffered subfile is pulling in data from the wire. Set is a built-in, but not everyone kind of knows about it. And you do see instances of people kind of creating their own deduplication processes. If you've got a list and you want to sort of just have unique values, you can turn them into a set. There's also a set literal that's been recently introduced into the language. And set has overridden a couple of Python's operators to be able to make sure that you can do interesting things like find the subtract one set from another and so forth. If you create something using sort of the functional, you've got this iterable, just pointing it out there, just remember to use generator expressions rather than constructing things inside a list comprehension, because this will actually construct everything in RAM and then send it to set. Whereas up here, we're only sending it out, every element will sort of go into the constructor function. Flying through into the collections module, I was really interested in, I find the collections module one of the most interesting places for useful tools in the standard library. And I was quite interested in figuring out how they're actually used in real life. If you use GitHub search from collections, import dec in file using Python, so for the language specifier, you kind of get these counters of how each of these data structures are actually used. So counter here is used about 1,000 times throughout all of the open source projects within GitHub that are tagged sort of as Python. We'll start with sort of name tuple. If you can construct sort of like baby classes that are very, very memory efficient using this construct. We have something that's quite attractive. We can create points with X and Y attributes. And we get really nice error messages if we use attributes that don't exist. But even though we've only called one function, if we add sort of the verbose flag, we're actually constructing a class here with a whole bunch of stuff in it already. Oh, excuse me. And I think the thing this is a quote from the standard library documentation. It doesn't matter how many instances of point that you create, they're just going to have the memory overhead of just creating regular tuples. And so if you were to read something off the wire, or out of a database, or out of a CSV file, and you want really nice attribute access, but you don't want the memory overhead of creating dictionaries, you can use this name tuple construct to be very memory efficient and also create really readable code for yourself. The dec construct is also in collections. It takes sort of an iterable and has a max length. And the good thing about it is that it supports appends and access from both the left and the right side of whatever you're using. And so the trade-off, though, is that if you try to access or change anything in the middle of the collection that you're dealing with, it's actually much, much slower than using a regular list. So these are used quite extensively as in-memory buffers. So here's a project that I happened to found, this thing called Metaverse Exchange Protocol, and they will append inbound messages and outbound messages, and as things change their state, they'll pop things up from either side. Here someone's created their own kind of logging object that will append things to a dec as they come in. And they're generally used sort of as stacks and queues. So this is an implementation of a shortest path algorithm. Don't worry so much about it. The main point is just here. We start with this paths thing. We append the specific path that we're dealing with right now, which is kind of horribly initialized as an empty list, which is, if you know anything about mutable default attributes, well, default arguments is not really the best thing to do. But we append this paths, and then we kind of can pop from the left and also add to the right. The good thing about HTML slides is, things kind of fly around on you. Again, we've got another stack. As this dictionary here has a maximum size that we might want to use somewhere else, and this is a sort of a threading mechanism. Someone has created their own busy loop, a busy polling system, where they're going and they're finding an empty thread that's available, trying to find a job to get done. Then they will apply some process frame function, which is sort of defined up here, and then append that task. Just so that everyone is aware, there's actually a better way to do that. And that's this queue thing. If you import from queue, you'll find in Python standard dictionary a really good implementation of a thread-safe queue that supports being able to have jobs marked as done, and you're not going to get yourself into big tangles like creating this kind of mess in the future. Just the naming conventions through Python 3, the capitalization of the module name was changed. Sort of nearing the end of the collections module. We've got this counter thing. Has anyone sort of tried to implement a counter using a dictionary before themselves? So that's been done for you. I've been really struck by the bird life here in Brisbane as I've moved, sort of visited, and we don't really have many crows in Auckland, and we've got this counter object that you can see from the way that it's represented, that you can also actually initialize it using a dictionary as well, but I've just gone and been quite explicit here. If you try to access a field that doesn't currently exist. So there are no kookaburras in our sort of sample set. We get 0. And we've got a number of really convenient methods in the counter. We can pull out the most common things that we've counted up. And there are a whole bunch more in the Python's standard documentation. Generalizing more about when we want to do something with the dictionary when there's an empty field or an empty value, there's this default dict object. What we do here is initialize it with sort of this factory object when there is so when something is accessed which doesn't currently exist, please initialize or call this function, which in this case will return an empty list. So here's my log of sightings that, informally from New Zealand. There's these New Zealand native birds here. And I can, so down here, I can create this one here should be prefixed with NZ because I'm trying to reference NZ bird sightings. But effectively, I pull out a list with all the cities that I've been able to see this tui. But if I would look for crow, I haven't seen that at all in New Zealand. That's quite conveniently can be converted into sort of a regular dictionary. And I wanted to pause here just by mentioning we've explored a lot of space within the standard library already. And a lot of these things, especially in the collections module, started as recipes that were thrown around and put out in public. And not all of the recipes that Ray created and put up online have actually been included within the standard library. So one of them that didn't is this thing called a bag. If you were to put, if we had a counter that we had those 23 crows, and we wanted to be able to pull out one by one, if 3 or 4 of those crows, we can't do that using the tools that we've got. And so he actually went and just asked the community to see if that's good enough for inclusion. And they said, well, no, not really. And so it's not there. And if you read the developer guide, you'll see that this is exactly the kind of practice that is encouraged within contributions to Python. So if you've found something that's useful, that would extend a module in the standard library, please gauge the usefulness of the code. Typically, this is done by sharing the code publicly. You'll have a couple of options, and one of them is to post it online in the Python cookbook. And that's exactly what happened. And I just wanted to sort of put it out that you might have these gods in the Python universe, but they're still actually quite human, and they're still following standard practice. So there are these tools that are available to you as someone who writes code for others. And abstract base classes are things that enable you to be able to create patterns that you would like to be enforced. And it's probably worthwhile, if you are a professional programmer, to take the time to learn about these tools, because I expect that their use is going to increase. And you can see it with the implementation of the selectors module, which makes for very, very fast I/O access using either select or KQ or poll or epoll, depending on the operating system, because of this statement that exists within the Python Developers Guide. Typically, you get 2 modules in the standard lib. One is a module which implements something that's difficult to get right. And if I go to the second paragraph, the second type of module is one that implements something that people re-implement themselves consistently or constantly. And so you can see that abstract base classes are an attempt to be able to make that second type of addition to the standard library much, much easier. So this is a sort of a quote supporting the use cases. They're useful if you want to create plugins or you'd like to enable third parties to extend your own code. But Let's move on to metaclasses just for a moment. Metaclasses is sort of another kind of danger zone within Python. There's this kind of famous paragraph from Tim Peters that was introduced into this book, Learning Python, which is now a little bit dated, but metaclasses are deeper magic than 99% of users should ever worry about. If you wonder whether or not you need them, you probably don't. The people that actually need them know with certainty why they need them, and they won't need an explanation. To be fair, though, that quote actually is one paragraph in fact, it's only a few sentences from a paragraph within a very, very long thread, where Tim's actually trying to express a couple of other attributes about the programming language itself. And that is sort of this deep magic to be able to go and manipulate objects has always been possible, and it's always been relatively obscure and difficult. And so I think from there you can kind of pull out three implications. One of them is that metaclasses are there for when you might need them. So if you are wanting to develop some sort of plugin infrastructure for yourself, and that as humans, the fact that you might not understand quite what's going right now when you sort of see these terms is probably okay. But it is complex. And the third thing that I've kind of drawn from it is that thinking about metaclasses can sort of deepen our understanding of Python. And so now it gets to the question, sort of, what is a metaclass? All a metaclass is a class that returns a class. And if you call my class, you'll then get out an instance. And so you can think of these my metaclass objects as things that are going to provide interfaces to the rest of your system without needing to provide all of the internals. Another thing to think about metaclasses, if you're kind of terrified by them, is that you already use them. The type function, although this has changed in Python 3, the type function already returns classes every single time that you instantiate an object. At least that's my understanding as it is currently. And so therefore, it's not that scary. So we've gone through things really quite quickly. And I just thought I would finish with three quick statements. The first one is I really think that all of the people within the Python community should enjoy the flexibility that the data structures provided in the standard library give you. You've got huge amounts of flexible and adaptable data structures which are really interesting to explore. But in order to explore them, I do recommend actually taking the time to inspect the standard library. In fact, not just reading the documentation, but do dig through into the source code to see how things are implemented. Because it's often the case, or at least in my experience as I was researching this talk, that you'll see some really fun and creative ways to use the language. And just for your reference, when you go into the source directory, you want to find the CPython project and then the lib folder within there. That's the standard library when it's implemented in Python. That's kind of where you want to go. And where I wanted to finish was that if you are curious about contributing, go to this website, pythonmentors.org. It's a no danger, no threat space for people who are interested in contributing and who are really interested in interacting with the core dev team. And I'm sure that the members of the core dev team who are actually at the conference here would love to chat about helping you out. So that actually wraps up the talk. And I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've chatted about so far. Thanks.